The lights hit like noon in a desert, 100 feet of LED ocean glittering over a stage that looks more like a launchpad than a concert. A superstar stands in the middle of it all and stares at the clock. Not the one counting down to showtime, but the one counting down to the end. That's the picture people whisper about. That's where our scandal begins. This is Scandal News, and tonight we follow the rumour smoke and the paper trails, the subposts and the subtext, the moments that make fans ask the most dangerous question in music. Who is really in control? The artist or the machine? The story we're about to tell doesn't rely on clips or talking heads. We're taking you inside the rooms where decisions get made and onto the stages where the consequences land like thunder. First, the road. Imagine a dressing room that smells like cologne and cables, a table with a setlist taped to it, a water bottle with the label peeled halfway off, a phone buzzing every 30 seconds with requests, demands, and urgent questions. The camera rises, the jacket goes on, and the roar of the crowd leaks through the walls like the ocean through a cracked hull. For years, this scene was a victory lap. Lately, people swear it looks like a hostage tape with better lighting. Fans scroll through posts and tour diaries that should feel celebratory but land like escape notes. They spot the countdown captions. They catch the "only X more nights" jokes that don't sound like jokes. They remember the shows where lyrics slipped, where transitions lagged, where the energy felt contracted. The whisper turns into a sentence. He doesn't want to be out there. He looks like he's serving a sentence, not headlining the year. Cut to another stage across the map. Different city, different tone. Where one tour feels like obligation, another looks like a pilgrimage. New arrangements, new risks, a set that changes because the artist is changing. Fans don't just buy a ticket, they buy a chapter. Even critics admit it. This isn't repetition, it's revision. It's an argument that performance can still be a frontier. Underneath those two stages sits the lever that moves everything: contracts. Picture a high-floor office with glass that won't open even if you push. A table of executives who smile like poker players. A pen that costs a car. Slide the paper forward. Initial here, here, and here. What do you get? The catalogue handled, the advance wired, the tour underwritten, the promotion guaranteed. What do you give? Time, flexibility, control of the calendar, sometimes more than you realise. This is where the word forced starts showing up in fan theories. It's a heavy word, so let's be careful. Nobody's frog marching a megastar to a stage, but if your signature promises 40 dates and then additional dates as routed and a bonus clause triggers only if you complete the run, then a missed city is not just a rain check, it's a penalty. It's a line of disappointed fans, a line of refunded seats, and a line item on a report that says you underdelivered. Now multiply that by brand obligations, after parties you didn't pick, and partners who think fatigue is a problem for doctors, not promoters. This is the engine people point to when they say the smile looks thin, and it's why the countdown posts sting, because a countdown is a confession. The end is the prize. Now we go to the charts, the scoreboard that's supposed to settle every argument, but somehow only starts new ones. A graphic flashes across the timeline. The global top 200 barely has rap on it this week. 4 songs. Maybe 5 if you're generous about categories. Panic spreads like a rumour in homeroom. Commentators dive in looking for a villain. Some blame the serious era, the lyrical wars, the heavyweight exchanges that burned so hot they left little oxygen for party singles. Some say rap got too dense for the timeline and stopped auditioning for dances. But rewind the tape. Look at the year before the storm, when the release schedule sprinted like it was getting paid by the mile. The music kept coming, but the moments felt thinner. Hooks engineered for 7 seconds, not 3 minutes. Albums structured like playlists. Singers rapping and rappers singing because the algorithm liked it that way. A lot of what landed was temporary. A lot of what stuck wasn't about music at all. Fans didn't just get bored, they felt handled. They felt like subjects in A/B tests. So when the chart graphic arrives, one side screams, "See? The lyricists ruined the fun!" And the other side laughs because charts only measure part of the map. And because, quietly, without the confetti cannons, a different type of track has been dominating. Songs built like monologues, hooks that don't need a dance, verses that are supposed to be replayed, not skipped. Those records don't just visit the charts, they haunt them. They don't climb like acrobats, they seep. like weather. Meanwhile, something surreal happens on a stage most rappers never imagined they'd set foot on. Marble floors, vaulted ceilings, a place where applause sounds like thunder rolled in velvet. Hip-hop at the Vatican. Not as a novelty, not as a stunt, as a statement that the craft can walk into any room and command it. The image burns into the culture. This isn't background music for a trend. This is art that eats silence and fills palaces. Whether you think it's symbolic or overdue, the message is plain. Rap ceiling keeps moving, and it isn't a nightclub chandelier anymore. Back on the other side of the city, the campaign of deflection begins. The captions that seem to shade rivals. The likes that feel like subtweets in disguise. The familiar story leaks. Blame the one artist who insists on building mountains where others build hills. Tell the crowd he's the reason the carnival isn't fun. Insist that the constant back and forth has divided the fan base, as if a divided fan base isn't the definition of a passionate one. But there's a problem with trying to scapegoat the guy who keeps winning the hard mode game. The more you point, the more people compare, and comparisons start to cut. Who's evolving? Who's rotating sounds and structures? Who's bleeding for the set list? Who's snapping selfies and asking how many nights are left? Here's a story the teams won't tell. An artist who once looked untouchable tries to coast. The air thins at that altitude. Coasting turns into drifting. Drifting turns into missing the exit. By the time the wheel gets tight again, the road is unfamiliar and the GPS is lying. The fans aren't blind. They're historians with better Wi-Fi. They remember the precise feeling of a classic rollout. They know the difference between a clean victory lap and content to hit a quota. They can tell when the narrative is doing the work and when the work is doing the narrative. And they're watching the companies behind their favorites like hawks. Because if the artist won't say the quiet part loud, the paperwork eventually will. Let's talk about that paperwork in plain language. There are only 3 things a mega deal can buy: time, leverage, and illusion. Time, because an advance means you don't have to chase cash immediately. Leverage, because your name fills buildings and you can push for favorable splits. Illusion, because for a while it looks like you're steering a ship no one else can touch. Then the calendar starts to own you. The clause you skimmed becomes the cliff you have to climb. The options for additional dates don't feel optional. And every time a city gets added, for the fans, another week of sleep gets carved out of your future. Now add the culture war to that schedule. Add the pressure of a rival whose show is a sermon and whose songs turn from verses into vocabulary. Lines people use in arguments, the way fans used to quote scripture at each other in dorm rooms. Add the sight of hip-hop reintroduced to the world from fantasy stages, opera houses, cathedrals, black-tie charity events, while your brand is selling hoodies with tour stops like an alibi. Of course the handlers lean into narrative management. Of course the machine looks for a villain to point at. Because if the story becomes rap is evolving and we didn't, the merch table goes quiet. If the story becomes the microwaved single era ended and no one told us, the pipeline clogs. You can't make last year's sound into next year's headline. You can only make it into a clearance rack. Here's the twist some fans aren't ready to hear. This is good news. If you love the genre, you want pressure. Pressure makes the albums get weird again. It makes tempos slow down or speed up for reasons that have nothing to do with a social challenge. It turns the live show from a confetti queue to a confession booth. When artists feel the ground tilting, they either build, fall, or blame. And blame is the least creative option in music or life. Zoom in on the studio. The room is warmer than a stage. Quieter too. The Notes app is a battlefield. There are 3 ways out of a slump: reinvent, recommit, or redirect. Reinvent means scrapping the comfort foods, calling collaborators who challenge you, choosing fear over familiarity. Recommit means sharpening what you're great at until it cuts through walls. Redirect means changing the subject. Find a rival, find a rumor, feed the timeline and hope the numbers look like momentum. You can tell who picked which path by the music and the silence around it. Reinvention has a tell. The spaces between releases feel purposeful. The scalpel shows. Recommitment has a drum, a pulse you can hear across a year. Redirection has a scent. The long caption, the fast flurry, the sudden pivot to anything but the song. There's another character in our story, the audience's memory. It's longer than any rollout. When you treat listeners like numbers, they become accountants. When you treat them like witnesses, they become evangelists. Accountants check charts. Evangelists quote lines in court, at dinner, on dates, in comments. Accountants ask, how did it perform? Evangelists say, this saved my week. That's why the cathedral matters. Not because marble is better than a club stage, but because ambition is louder than volume. When rap stands under vaulted ceilings and doesn't flinch, it gives permission to the rest of the genre. Take yourself seriously. The world will follow. When a rival sneers and calls it doing too much, what he really means is, I can't afford that kind of risk right now. Back at the arena with the countdown clock, the dilemma is simple. If you're tired, sit down. If you're uninspired, disappear until you aren't. If the contract won't let you, finish it with dignity and reinvent in the dark. Nothing ages worse than visible resentment. Crowds can smell it from the parking lot. They'll still sing for you, but they won't forgive you. Not because they're cruel, but because they paid for belief. It's hard to believe a show that looks like a commute. Now, a question people keep throwing around, is the genre down bad? Or are we just recalibrating after a sugar high? The answer is in the shapes of the hits that do break through. They aren't propped up by side quests. They don't need scandal to move. They're rugged or lush or dangerous or tender, but they are unmistakably songs, things with spines, not skits with budgets. They come from artists who either stayed obsessive or became obsessive again. Another question, if the machine is so powerful, why does it feel nervous? Because machines love predictability. They optimize patterns, they monetize habits, they reward repetition. And the new center of gravity in rap is chaos. Personal, artistic, spiritual chaos. That's not a bug, it's a feature. The best work right now sounds like someone tugged war with their own reflection and won by surrendering. The next months will tell us who understood the assignment. If we see the same playbook, surprise drops designed to look spontaneous, single art that looks like luxury brand lookbooks, guest features that feel like business meetings, we'll know the lesson didn't land. If we see odd pairings, long songs that shouldn't work but do, rollouts that feel like novels instead of trailers, we'll know the wheel turned. There's a detail the casuals miss about falling off. It's rarely a cliff. It's usually a staircase you don't realize you're walking down. One step is a safe choice disguised as a victory. The next is a brand deal that edits your instincts. By step 5, you're telling fans what the song means because the song didn't. By step 10, you're counting nights instead of verses. The cure is as brutal as it is beautiful. Risk something again. Risk the wrong tempo. Risk the wrong feature. Risk the right silence. Because silence can be a weapon when you're cooking. It's only a weakness when you're stalling. So where does this leave the two stages we started with? On one, the contract is a shadow. On the other, the mission is a torch. Both artists are targets. Both are mythic. But myth only works when it's moving. The machine can distribute a myth. It cannot write one. Fans write myths with replay buttons and paragraphs in group chats. And lately they're writing about the performances that feel like vigils, not parties. Behind the scenes, publicists will keep setting fires where they want us to look. They'll point to the weekly chart. See, he's back. They'll point to the viral clip. See, she's cooked. They'll book high-contrast photo shoots to sell the idea of reinvention, even if the music still wears last season's hoodie. All of it matters, and none of it decides anything. The record decides. The show decides. The face an artist makes when the second verse lands decides. If you're an artist watching this, here's the harsh mercy the culture is offering you. We will forgive boredom faster than we forgive cynicism. If you miss trying. If you miss calculating, the crowd becomes a jury and the sentence is silence. If you're a fan watching this, here's your power. Stop rewarding the countdown clock. Reward the craft. Don't let your favorites starve, but don't feed them junk. Cheer when they risk, boo when they phone it in. And remember, Numbers don't lie is a slogan. Art lies, tells the truth, contradicts itself, makes a promise, breaks it, and then makes another one that saves your week. That's why you're here. That's why we're all here. In the months ahead, expect more narratives trying to pin the genre's fatigue on the people actually waking it up. Expect the "he ruined the fun" chants to get louder every time an uncomfortable verse works. Expect the machine to promote safe bangers that feel familiar enough to pass but not strong enough to stay. Expect backlash to the backlash, stan wars disguised as think pieces, and sudden bursts of humility when a cathedral performance breaks through the walls of the internet and into living rooms that never play hip-hop. Expect, most of all, the truth to surface in the same two places it always does: on stage and in the headphones. If the show looks like a job, it is. If the song feels like a life, it is. No press run can hide either for long. So what happens to the star staring at the clock? There are two endings. In the first, the contract finishes him. He finishes the contract. He hurries home and heals in private. He finds a new reason to do all this that isn't zeros on a statement. The next time he steps out, the grin is real because the risk is real. In the second, the clock wins. The music becomes a souvenir line for a tour that never ends. The fans keep coming until they don't. And then the machine, hungry as ever, finds a new pilot. Our bet? The artists who look exhausted will either vanish for a season or surprise you. The artists who look possessed will build cathedrals in unlikely places. Sonically, spiritually, literally. The genre will wobble between spectacle and scripture, and the audience will pick the side that feels like oxygen. If you're keeping score at home, here's the ledger that matters. Does the new music demand your attention without bribing it? Does the show honor your time without apologizing for ambition? Does the artist sound like they want to be alive on stage? Everything else is merchandising. A last thought for the teams behind the stars. You can program exposure. You cannot program awe. Awe happens when somebody bleeds for an idea in front of strangers and doesn't flinch. If you want the world back, trade the countdown clock for a mirror and ask the only question that saves careers: what would we make if the chart didn't exist? Scandal News will be here to follow every swerve, every risk, every reinvention worth your time. If you want the real stories without the industry sugarcoating, you're in the right place. Tap subscribe, hit the bell, and drop a comment with the next scandal you want us to unravel. Your attention is your vote. Use it.